Hey everybody, welcome. It's rowing chat time again. Thank you for granting me the indulgence of a break while I went to the Rio Olympics. I'm here today with my guest, who is one of the Olympic gold medalists from that event, Kim Brennan. Kim, welcome to Rowing Chat.
Thank you.
So tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
I'm 31. I live in Canberra, Australia. I started rowing when I was 19, 20. And I rowed 11 years on the Australian team. I rowed in every Olympic boat class internationally and ended up in the single scull for the Rio Olympics.
Wow, that's quite a track record. And you're using the past tense there. Does that imply that you're no longer on the team?
I haven't decided yet, but I definitely will take some time away from the sport. I'm starting a new job in November.
And you're a lawyer, aren't you, in your other life?
Yes. I'm a lawyer by trade, but I'm actually moving into consulting with the global firm Ernst & Young. So really looking forward to that.
Fantastic. So you have obviously always been a sporty kid. How did you get started in competitive sport?
I always played pretty much every sport under the sun except rowing. I loved, my main sports were probably surf lifesaving, field hockey, netball and track and field. And as I got a little bit older through school, I was getting my best results in sprinting, 400 metre hurdling. I went away to the World Youth Games in 2001 and won a silver medal in the 400 hurdles and started training properly for that sport. I got injured. I got injured a number of times, but most significantly when I was 19, I got a stress fracture in my right foot. I had surgery. The surgeon told me that it wasn't successful and I wouldn't run again. And I was doing some rehab on the rowing ergo. The rowing coaches spotted me and I think they felt sorry for me and invited me to come down to the rowing club. Initially, I wasn't besotted with the idea of rowing, but I really liked the people, the magnificent community in rowing. And I instantly had, 50 new friends and I just loved the culture and I loved the community. And then very quickly, I also came to love the sport.
That is a fantastic story. So the coaches who just happened to look at you, I like that. What was the club that you joined?
I joined Melbourne University Boat Club. I was a student at Melbourne University at the time, but they were also running a talent ID program around that time. The whole irony of the situation is that I didn't meet any of the thresholds except for the fact I was tall. I had no upper body strength because I was a sprinter. I was really light and weak. I had no endurance because I was a sprinter, and so was terrible at all of the talent ID tests, but I am 6'2", so and I knew how to train. So I think they felt sorry for me. So two clubs were involved in the talent ID. One was Mercantile and one was Melbourne Uni, and I was essentially allocated to Melbourne Uni. But I'm so glad I was because I've been there ever since, and it's been the most amazing club.
It's a very professionally run, very large club, isn't it?
It is. We have a lot of international rowers through Melbourne Uni, which is a lot of fun. You get to see how people from different countries train and they get to be a part of the Australian system. And it's a big club because we've got a lot of masters and a lot of elite and then a lot of club rowers as well. And that's one of the really nice things is that, rowing brings a whole lot of people together for different reasons. And I think it's a sport you can be involved with for life, even if you're not competing at the top level.
So you obviously don't run, or you can run as in run but not compete running?
I haven't run for a long time. I think I could probably go for a run. I'm not sure I'd be able to train as a hurdler, but I mean I still occasionally have niggles in that bone when I'm doing explosive work in the gym, but I think in terms of doing a long cross country run I'd probably be okay.
So at 19, obviously with a bit of age and maturity now, that's quite a young age to be told something as final as your desired sporting career is officially over. Can you think back, how did this affect you?
Yeah, it's a funny one because I think teenagers are not fantastic at processing emotion at the best of time, and I wasn't an exception. I look back and by far that was, I remember it, just the depth of emotion. Nothing in my head, nothing worse could have happened to me, and I thought it was the worst day of my life. But that's the best part of it, because I could look back on it and say that it was actually the best thing that ever happened to me, because it gave me so much opportunity. It gave me the opportunity to find a new sport, but it also gave me the perspective that in the future, when things go wrong, it feels awful at the time and you grieve at the time, but it makes us a lot stronger. And so every time, I have an injury or a bad race, it's just in the back of my head that this is awful now, but it's okay, because I will actually come out of this even better than I went into it.
Were you taught how to do that mental processing?
I think that experience was really important to me, because I had living proof that, like, the depth of emotion at that time was so significant, and then I could see how that was actually a good thing, that was one of those lessons that you really take with you. But we also do a lot of work with sports psychologists as part of training, and one of the great things with that is you get to reflect on your beliefs and why you think them, and why certain things are significant to you, and become to challenge those ideas. So that's one of the things that I've better been able to understand what that actually means to me.
How long did it take you to feel that you had moved past and harnessed the power of that particular event in your life?
I think probably the first time I raced in rowing. It was just such a... because rowing's really hard. And I just think that being able to put your body through that, you feel a real satisfaction at the end of a race that, oh God, I just did that. And I think even then I started to realise how much I loved this sport, and had the inklings of, actually, this is already a good thing. And then as the years went by, it was only confirmed that, particularly as my body changed, as I got stronger as a rower, that this sport is much better for me.
Very interesting. I had the pleasure while in Rio to sit on an underground train next to some American track and field athletes, and the girl next to me said that she was a 400-meter hurdler. And I was sitting down and I looked at her, and I'm 5'10", I'm a heavyweight woman rower, and I looked at her legs next to me, and her knees, she could fit both of her knees into the width of my knee. And you told me you're 6'2", kind of makes me think you're not the traditional build of a 400-meter hurdler.
No, I'm definitely taller than your average sprinter. I was a lot lighter back then. I've put on almost 20 kilos since coming to rowing. So my shape has also changed a lot, and my aerobic capacity has changed a lot. But I think realistically, if I had stuck with track and field, I probably would have had to run a little bit further, because as you get to the higher levels, you probably want a few more fast twitch fibers.
It's interesting, isn't it, how particularly as you get into the higher levels of almost any sport, there is mostly a dominant physique, and you begin to see it coming through.
Yeah, I think rowing is fortunate in that, it definitely helps to be tall, but we do have a number of really good rowers who are shorter and stockier and really work on their strength. And I think one of the great things with rowing is it really rewards people who put in a lot of time. When I started rowing, I certainly wasn't strong, and I had one of the worst aerobic capacities they've ever tested on the Australian team. But that is hugely malleable. You can change that by training. And I think that that's something that I really love about this sport.
I was just writing that down because I think I can definitely empathise with that. One of the things that I personally love about the sport, because I teach a lot of adult beginners, is that nobody is any good when they start. And I always try to encourage people. So I think I will now say, Kim Brennan was useless when she started. Because it's not like running. Everybody thinks they can run, but you cannot. You just can't handle oars in a boat. Even in a stable, learn to scull boat. It feels...
It's funny because I'd watched rowing on TV and it looks kind of easy, and they did get in a boat and it was not easy. I spent a lot of time falling in initially, and it's one of those things that you put a highly competitive person, very driven, in a rowing boat, and it doesn't really help to just go harder all the time, particularly when you don't put both oars in the water or you don't put either oar in the water. But that's one of the other great things about it is that, I mean, even at the Olympic level, you're still learning every day. There's so much to learn, and you can never be perfect. So there's always more to get out of every session, which is pretty cool.
It is, and I definitely feel there are two types of sport. There's the team playing sport where practicing particular moves within the team gives you the edge. And then there are sports where you just need to go in a straight line from A to B. And often they are the ones where it's a cyclical, repetitive movement, like running or swimming, cross country perhaps. And these have very different rewards emotionally for the participants. Going back to your very first rowing lesson, can you remember it? Tell us what happened.
So I'd been taken down to the Yarra River by John Cumper, who was one of the VIS coaches. And he put me in a single scull, like a racing single scull, and pushed me off. And he'd given me no further instruction. I'd rowed on an ergo before, but never with any instruction other than watching the other rowers. And I got in, and those boats are so tippy. And like, I'm pretty sure I didn't move my seat at all because I was too scared, and I was sort of like, I didn't know how to turn, I didn't know how to do anything. Anyway, I sort of got my way like 50 metres up the river and then 50 metres back, and I was thoroughly unimpressed. And the Yarra was disgusting on that day, and it was brown and smelly. And I sort of thought, oh, not quite what I was imagining. But then after that, they put me out in eights, and I loved it. So I actually learnt to sweep before I learnt to scull. I spent my first 5 years on the Australian team as a sweeper.
So the team element, was that the thing that made the difference, or was it just the difference between sweep and sculling?
I found sweep a lot easier because I only had one oar to manage, and the theory was you just whack it in and then you lever on it, and I could conceptualise that. And I just loved the team element. It's so fun to be with a group of people and really put yourself on the line for a bunch of people that you really care about. And I just love that element of it so much. And particularly coming from an individual sport, I just loved the community, and it really was that brought me to the sport.
And are you still in touch with some of those girls?
Yeah, definitely. One of them was a bridesmaid at my wedding.
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations. So now obviously you've made the switch to being a sculler, and first a double sculler and now a single sculler. And as you pointed out, you've raced in every boat class. That implies you've obviously also done a quadruple scull. When you train, obviously you've done now 2 Olympic cycles, at least partly, if not wholly, in the single. Are you always alone when you train?
No, so this preparation, I always train with a training partner. I don't like being by myself. But I also did a fair bit of work in the men's quad, which I love because I love being a part of a team. But it was also fantastic because they row particularly well. They have a really nice rhythm, and it's great practice for me to move faster and really test my skills in that boat. So they were very kind to let me jump in whenever one of them was out. And so that was a really good experience. But also domestically, I train in a group of guys, and we row crew boats at least once or twice a week. And, you know, at all our domestic regattas, I'll race doubles with whoever will row with me.
Very interesting. You're the first international that I've ever interviewed who talked about training both in their own boat class and in other boat classes. Is this something that's unique to your training program?
I think it's probably a little bit of where I've come from. I was brought to rowing because I love the team element of it, and I think, you know, in a perfect world, I would have loved to have stayed in team boats, but having had some success in the single in London and realising, oh, this is a great challenge, like a really good thing for me to try and do and try to become better, that particularly with my coach Lyle, we really loved having that challenge. But we were also very realistic that for me to be able to enjoy it over 4 years, I still needed to have a squad around me and to keep mixing it up in the crew boats, because I think you learn a lot more. It's a different stimulus in a crew boat, and you jump in behind someone and, you know, they might be moving their hands faster or slower, or catches slightly different or sequence slightly different, and you can feel the impact that has on the boat. And it doesn't always mean that you want to change how you row your single, but sometimes it gives you a little bit of something that it's like, oh, actually that bit of extra patience around there will help, or that little bit of extra leg speed. It gives you a different stimulus to learn something new.
Very interesting. So you're obviously a perfectionist who enjoys the process of studying how the boat moves through the water. What are the key parts of that, if you were to explain it to somebody?
I think you put your blades in the water, and then you lever off the blades, and then you don't slow the boat down.
Right. And what are the things that you notice?
I think I do a lot of listening, and I really like hearing my oars go in the water, and I like listening to the bubbles under the boat when the boat's going really well. Obviously, if the water's rougher, you don't hear that, you hear wind. But particularly crew boat as well, I think timing by sound can be a really good way to time catches and finishes. I also really focus on the stern of the boat, making sure that when I'm going into the catch, I'm not getting a dip of the stern, so not spending too much time there when I put my blades in the water. And then similar at the finish, I really want to feel my feet on the foot plate, so I'm not putting weight into the bow, which is just going to slow the boat down. But it's pretty much all about the boat, so just being aware of the impact that I'm having on the boat.
Do you have any particular drills or exercises you use that you could share with us to focus on these particular areas?
I do a lot of drills. Every day I'd warm up with drills. Some sessions, particularly when I get physically really tired, I'll just dedicate a whole session to drills, because I can't meet the speeds that I'd be wanting to meet, but still want to learn something. And so I do a lot of blade drills. During different stages of my career, I focused on different things. I think early in my career, we were very focused on catch drills, so like legs only and stuff the duck, and just that first bit of the front turn.
Stuff the duck? This is a new one on me. How do you stuff a duck in a rowing boat?
I have no idea why it's called stuff the duck, but the drill is essentially that you put the blades in the water and you just take the first 5 centimetres of leg drive, and you do that repetitively. We call that stuff the duck.
We call that quarter side push. How interesting. Stuff the duck. I'm going to write that one down as well. Keep going. What were the other drills? So you started off with early in your career with legs only and stuffing ducks.
And then when the sequence becomes a bit more reliable, we focus a lot more on the blade drills. And one of the things we love doing is getting competitive with our blade drills and having blade drill races, which can be quite hilarious. But things like reverse feather or double square, or what else do we do? Blade slaps.
Slapping your blade on.
Yep. Pretty much anything we can make up. Wide grip. The idea being that by doing something challenging, you're over-stimulating your mind. And so when you take that away, you can really relax a lot more in the actual rowing stroke. So it doesn't really matter what it is sometimes.
So you're racing, is this over a fixed distance?
We normally do shorter pieces when we do our blade drill race work, but we used to, every Monday morning, the whole session would be drills, and in the second half of the session, our coach would call the first few pieces. It's like, this is what we're doing, and then you'd race 20 strokes, and then we'd all get to choose one, and would obviously choose the one that we were best at, and race over that.
I like it. Definitely embedding the competitive instinct. And it's very clear to me, having met obviously a lot of rowers over the years, that coaching children absolutely love racing. If I ever said to them, what would you like to do this session? They'll go, can we have a race?
Doesn't change.
Doesn't. And I find that reflection hard to understand when you read newspaper reports about sport in schools, that I genuinely feel that kids have not been stimulated if they don't respond to that sort of opportunity when they're between the ages of 10 and 14. A little bit older, it can be a bit different because it might be a bit too cool for school, but it's definitely, I think, a human instinct, a desire to have a race.
Yeah, and the thing is that, you don't care if you win or lose. You just go in and you joke about how funny that was when you tried to rate 40 at reverse feather, and it's all in good faith, but it keeps things very interesting and very fun.
I totally agree. And it's definitely an obvious quality of skill and skilled athletes that they are comfortable in their craft, easy in the boat, and very happy to clown around doing odd things. There's go on.
We actually used to do sessions where the whole purpose of the session was to fall in. So you wanted to challenge yourself to the point that you were going to come out of your boat. And it's a funny one because we actually fall in a fair bit just by, steering onto, we've got these giant red buoys around the lake in Canberra, and I've definitely hit my fair few and ended up in the water. But doing a session actually intending to fall in can be really hard. It's quite hard to fall out of your boat. Like, your instinct is to grab your oars and you can go a long way over without coming out. But that's essentially the lesson, to just be comfortable in your boat, that you can move a lot, you can tip around a lot, and you'll still stay in.
When I was learning to sail in little dinghies, they taught us a capsize drill, and the boat tilted over. We all bailed out. The boat righted itself and went off. Easy to do. So when you fall in, how do you get back in your boat?
I actually think, again, it's a bit of an instinct, because when you're learning and you fall in, you're so embarrassed about falling in that it's like all of a sudden you're back in your boat before anyone could possibly notice. You get a bit older and you don't fall in as much, and you get a little bit more procedural about it, and it's a lot harder. It's like, tip the boat, put the oars over so they're together, hold on to the oars, push yourself over the back and slide back in. I think the way kids do it, and just like, poof.
There's a very nice video which Peter Shakespeare owns of a capsize drill in a swimming pool being done by some kids in Australia. And there's a small boy who has been told to capsize his boat. And what he does is he throws the oars away and then holds one of the riggers and pulls it vertical. And as he pulls it vertical, he manages to slip round and sit on the upside down hull. And he then stands up on the hull of the boat, pulls the rigger vertical again to tilt the boat round the right way, and sits down and has the oars just behind him. And you can see him look around going, this isn't quite right, not sure I'm not supposed to do this. And he then just pops the oars over his head and sits down, and he hasn't got wet except for his feet. And you wouldn't think it was possible until you see that.
So Peter Shakespeare was at the Institute when I first ended up there, and he was doing all of that work with his juniors and talent IDs that were coming through. And even, before I was heading off to the London Olympics, I was still doing the balance drills and the taps and the turning, and just trying, because I guess starting later in my career, I didn't have the years as a junior where you just splash around out on the water. It was like straight into the women's 8 and serious training. So in a lot of ways, I skipped the the fine motor skill part of the sport. So those drills were great for learning that.
Now, we've got a question here from Aparna Chandrashakrenan from Madras Boat Club in India, who says, how do you stay motivated to practice on your own?
I think a couple of things. Wherever possible, I train in a training squad. And even when we travel over to Gavirate Rowing Club, where we base in Europe, I train with some of the local lightweight boys there who keep it a lot more fun. But the other thing is that the thing I love about rowing is learning something every session. So there's always something to get out of a session. My coach and I always have a purpose of what we want to achieve and the changes that I want to make. And so you've got a very finite thing that you want to achieve that makes it really easy to get out there and do the session, because you get that satisfaction when you come in that I'm better than when I started.
Do you keep a training diary?
I used to. Earlier in my career, I'd always write down exactly what it was that I was working on, and which is really nice to look back on. Later in my career, when I wasn't working so much and had a bit more time, would do a lot more talking. My coach and I would just sit down and talk about what it was that I was thinking and what I was feeling, and it was a lot more innate. I didn't feel that I had to actually write it down for it to be there. It was very clear in my mind where I started, where I finished, and where I was going tomorrow.
Now, Lyle McCarthy's your coach at the moment, and you have reputedly only had one coach for most of your international career. How did that come about? It's most unusual.
Yeah, Lyle's coached me internationally pretty much my whole rowing career. I've had a few other coaches domestically, but a lot of it was by chance. We didn't always get along so well. When I first started rowing, I found him really frustrating. I think neither of us took the time to really get to know each other properly. And I actually switched from sweep rowing to sculling, so I'd be able to work with a different coach. And he got switched as well. So I still had him as a coach, but at that point in time, we actually sat down and talked about how we'd experienced the previous 5 years and realised that we hadn't taken the time to understand each other. And it was a really good lesson about the importance of honesty. It's so easy to talk about someone behind their back and complain about the things that drive you nuts. But to say it to someone's face is really hard. But by both of us doing that, it was just a big moment of, oh my gosh, like, we are on the same page here. And we've had so much fun ever since. He is the best technical rowing coach you could ever hope for. He's more passionate about rowing than anyone I've ever met. And having someone who is so invested in your journey is really special. And so he coaches the men's scullers domestically as well as me, and then internationally just coaches me. So the stimulus of coaching the men as well is really important, because I think as an athlete I'm always trying to learn, but as a coach he's also always trying to learn, and having a different stimulus really gives him more ideas about what we need to work on. But I think that's something about the single scull is you need to be a part of a team. You need to work well with your coach, and I'm so lucky that I had someone who is just so brilliant at what he does and so passionate about what he does.
So in our listeners, I'm sure we have people who are single scullers and who have coaches. How would you advise them to approach a discussion like that with their coach? I
think the most important thing is to be clear on your purpose. A lot of people say, oh, I want to win an Olympic gold medal, but they don't actually mean it or show it in the way they go about things day to day. I think, being clear in your goals, but also being really clear in your values, the things that matter. And I think that's one of the things that I respect the most about Lyle, is that he's got so much genuine care for people. He just wants to teach, and he wants people to improve. And that's the same as my attitude to rowing. I just want to get better. And I think realising that people are actually quite strong, you can be honest and say, this is how I experience something, this is how I perceive you, and have that conversation. And by having it out on the table, you can actually deal with those issues rather than, just keeping them inside, getting frustrated by them, and not giving the other person an opportunity to realise that the fact that we're always an hour late to every session is really annoying.
Got it. And you don't think there's a male-female difference in that approach?
I don't think it's a male-female difference. I think it's he's a very creative human being. If we're going to talk right brain, left brain, he's passionate, he's emotional, he's very innovative. He comes up with a lot of ideas. He's always exploring. He's like, you could go as far to say he's a little bit crazy in a good way. Like, he's so passionate and excited about rowing that there's always new things to explore. I'm very mathematical. I'm very systematic. I'm efficient. I like my order and my structure. And so we're actually a great team because you can't have too much of one and none of the other. And I think it was realising that our differences are actually strengths rather than things to get frustrated about. Like, I don't think he will ever be able to comprehend my need for everything to run smack bang on time. But I've learnt that, hey, that doesn't actually matter as much as, taking the time to explore something new. So I think a little bit of age and maturity on my part to actually value a difference rather than just see it as frustrating is probably the biggest factor in that.
So you're obviously a willing victim to his experiments, and yet you must get something back out of them, because I'm guessing they contributed to your goal.
Yeah, I think so. I think, we knew Rio was going to have tricky conditions, and we experimented a lot with boats and oars and fins, and just to be able to come up with the best combination of equipment. Unfortunately, we didn't get our weather forecasting right, but it's always, and you learn something new when you change things. You can learn, and I think what we also learn is that coming into regatta a couple of weeks before is when I want to start consolidating. So, we'll stop changing things then and have some certainty, because that's the balance between his needs and my needs. So, yeah, you learn.
Well, obviously you're going to have to move to London and spend some time on the tideway, because believe me, you can row in boat wash there, you can row in Rio in boat wash. Now, I'm going to take a short break now and talk a little bit about a sponsor's need. One of the things I love best about rowing are the stories told by athletes, by coaches, and by coxswains. There are tall stories, shaggy dog stories, stories that make us laugh, cry, or hide our head in shame. Row Perfect wants to publish a collection of rowing stories supplied by you, our readers. We're going to call it Rowing Tales, and it will be a printed book. I've started my research into rowing stories and was lucky to meet Drew Ginn, and this is his rowing tale. Have a listen.
So this story goes way back 20 years ago. The reason why I'm recalling it is because I've actually got Nick Green and James Tompkins and myself here at the regatta 20 years, and we're actually talking about having not only a crew, potentially a crew that's on board for an 8th row, but the story is 96 Olympic Games. I was 21 years of age, part of the main rules, of course, the athlete were getting the chance to break in and play for the Coach crew, which was, I think the guys really enjoyed that. But sitting on the start line, I was immediately really extremely nervous, looking across and seeing the towing crew on the other side, Slovenians just out further wider there, France and Great Britain in the middle, and Romania next to us. Romanians was scary. To me, best in, I mean, showed that in Lucerne, I was up in the bow and just chattering all the way to the track, and Jane was steering the two-seat, was struggling to get a word out. And so basically the last out of the bit is I'm going, up, go, up. We pulled the Italians back to, I think, 0.6 of a second on the finish line. So we had 2 weeks to see if we can close that margin up and turn the tables. So there it was, 10 school race, and we got off to an awesome start, part of the fun. Through the pocket of my guys sort of said, like it's not about rowing and trying to keep up with the zones or the remains of a particular day. It was about getting a fast start, but stay relaxed, stay composed. And if they were rooting into a fly, was to let them go no longer than half a length. And you knew that particularly great room, particularly the French crew, may not be so fast at the start, so that will put us right in the middle of the field. So, got through 500 were cold catches, lots of breathing calls, go to the 70-metre mark, arms into the body, keep the acceleration going. And the guys said the halfway mark would have been half a length. They were confident we could win. So I'm 21 years of age, seeing the how to is awesome game, with half a length. Right, I'll let you win. I'll live wrong and I'll give the guys a rundown of how we're actually tracking. And I don't know why I got that in my head. So I've gone, Italy, Romania, halfway down, Slovenia, halfway down, French through Britain, halfway down, British fellas, British Jones, and British, shut up! So, if you used to live against final, a little bit of enthusiasm, on being time to be quiet, almost distracted the guys from what we're doing, but the key part for me was the awesome part of having those guys asked me to say that my enthusiasm was a big factor for them, was a motivating factor, and then the clarity and calmness of someone who was 10 years my senior being James, who coached me at school, to have him turn around over his shoulder, it was just like being back in the schoolboy age, when you're in a speed like going, right, you be quiet. Stop talking in the certain thing. It was just amazing. And then we said, we told him, drop it off where you put down. It was just awesome to be able to have that feeling of that response and make that call. And so just the confidence the guys had to say, take responsibility for that. And then building on that, the gold medal was exceptional. But it did feel like I got back to school days with the top of the fight.
So there you go, a rowing tale by a well-known Olympian. But we don't just want stories from Olympians, we want your rowing tales. Please send them to us, talk, record it, write it, or draw it, and we're fast approaching our deadline for submissions. So please send them in to the Row Perfect website, go to the Contact Us page and drop them in there. We really, really want to get this published and make it a huge success. Back to Kim Brennan. Kim, does Rowing Australia have one training program for all of its athletes?
No, we don't. We have a number of different coaches with different training philosophies. We do, when we travel as a team, we do 1 or 2 sessions a week as a team, so compete against each other prognostically. But we don't have a single training blueprint. I think they're really trying to introduce that at a junior and under 23 level. And we've got a new structure moving forward, so it'd be interesting to see whether that's more streamlined. But I think we've had a lot of different influences in our coaching from different countries, from Italy, from Romania, some from Australia, from New Zealand, all with very different training ideas and models. So some of the coaches have very different ideas as to the optimal way to structure a training program.
So for yourself and your training, what does your average week comprise?
Yeah, we use the 80-20 model. So 80% of sub-threshold aerobic work and then 20% of intensity. I think probably where I went wrong earlier in my career was doing everything pretty hard. And when you do that, you get so tired that you can't do anything really well. So when I got a little bit more mature in my training, I really moved towards the aerobic sessions being aerobic and not being too hard, and being able to work on technique and just improve my aerobic capacity slowly over time. And then when we did work sessions, they were really hard, and we really went for it in those work sessions. So that's how we split up the week. I always had a big priority on weights. Coming from track and field where I was really light, I had to work really hard to put on muscle and had to work hard all through my career to sustain that, probably more so than some other athletes. So we did between 4 and 6 gym sessions a week, which is a lot for a rower.
And how many water sessions?
Coming into when I was in the single scull, I would do, let's work this out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 water sessions a week. I actually, in the last Olympiad, I didn't row on a concept erg except to do our erg testing. As I got a little bit older, I had a few back issues on the stationary erg, so I did all my work on the water. If for some reason we couldn't row, which is very rare because we'd go out in most conditions, but if it was so bad that we couldn't actually get on the water, I'd do my session on the row perfect. But the priority was we're about rowing, so we'll row.
That sounds pretty straightforward. Now, a question here from Phil Jurovich from Trinity College in Australia, and he says, what are your indicators that you are rested and ready to race? You obviously know, Phil.
I think tapering's a really interesting thing because you feel worse before you feel better. I think the thing with our body is it's so used to doing a certain amount of load that when you take that away, initially you go through this phase of feeling pretty awful. Your legs feel heavy, and you think, oh, maybe I'm a bit sick. I don't know, something's not right. But you know you're ready to race when you pop out the other side of that, and all of a sudden you just feel good within yourself. But the thing that I've really learned is to not worry too much about how you feel, because it's amazing what you can produce even in the middle of the hardest training block. You can still get very close to your best. You can still do great things when you're sick or when things are not quite right, as long as you don't worry about it. So I think often you'll get on the water for a race and you'll feel terrible. That's nerves. So just ignore that and just do it anyway.
So you're saying the mind is limiting you?
Yeah.
That's our challenge. I like that. I think I'm racing this weekend. I'll see what I can do about it. Now, one of the interviews I read with you talked about your Beijing Olympic experience and your deep disappointment in being in the B final in the women's pair. Do you think that your approach to training, which you alluded to earlier, was part of the consequence of that?
I think leading into Beijing, I was very much of the philosophy that it was almost like it's just a steamroller truck going through, that I'll do everything absolutely as hard as possible, and if I train harder than anyone else, then we'll get the result. And I think that was a big lesson to me, that rowing is not just a sport about doing things hard and doing more. It's about doing things well. And I really had to come back from that and put my mind to the art of rowing and the fact that it's a technical sport. There's a grace component to it as well as a hardness component. I think the biggest lesson was that it's not enough to want to win. I thought, because like in my head I wanted to win so much that I could make that happen just by sheer determination. It was a very humbling reminder that a lot of people put a lot of work into this, and not just in terms of sheer intensity, but also really applying themselves to working with the boat better.
So as obviously you popped very prominently onto the international scene as a single sculler after that Olympiad, do you think that that's proof that the vast majority of athletes go through one Olympic cycle not quite achieving and yet learning through the process before stepping up?
I think that's very true. I think there are a lot of examples of people who don't perform so well at their first games and learn a lot from that and do better the next time round. There are definitely your exceptions who are brilliant, who come out at their first games and absolutely blitz it. But I definitely know from my experience, I'm so glad I had the Beijing experience, both in terms of understanding how much people step up at the Olympics. I think I had sort of thought, oh yes, a good result at the World Championships the year before, and then you keep training and get better yourself, you'll get a better result at the Olympics. But the rest of the world really steps up for an Olympic Games. And I think understanding the nature of the Olympic cycle a bit better really helped me as well.
And then, of course, in London, you had dreadful uncertainty with your doubles partner's injury, which led you to a very extraordinary doubling up into 2 events. How did you approach that?
It was very much a take each day as it comes scenario. Brooke and I were selected in the double as a new double combination I think it was in April, and she broke her rib within about a week of that, and it was a really bad injury. And we were a great team. I loved rowing with Brooke. We're fantastic friends. My priority was always, we want this double to work. But there was a point there where we genuinely were not sure whether she'd be able to make it to the games, which was why I went to qualification in the single. Once that happened, I had to race the single at the games. And it ended up being a really good opportunity for me because of Brooke's injury. Even when she was back in the boat, I did half of my work in the single because she couldn't do the same load. So from a training point of view for the double as well, I think it really helped us. Brooke was so supportive, which was the biggest factor in the whole thing. She genuinely wanted me to do well in the single. There was no jealousy there, and I think one of the nicest things was we had the best race we could have hoped for in the double, and as much as we were aiming to win that race and we wanted that gold medal, we were beaten by an amazing crew who were thoroughly deserving of that gold medal. And I think it's really nice when you can walk away with the satisfaction that we've given what we've been through. We've done such an incredible job to get this result. And so had the British and so had the Polish in the bronze medal position. So, yeah, very satisfying.
Nice to hear that. Now, Stu Wong from Milwaukee Rowing Club in America asks, have you changed your technique since London 2012?
I think we're constantly looking to evolve. I think the biggest focus after London was I was still a pretty rough sculler. I was definitely better in a double than a single because I could apply my power a lot better, but didn't have the technical finesse to be able to manage a whole lot of conditions in a single scull. The biggest thing we changed was how I held the handles. Before, like in London, I was really grippy and sort of a lot of wrist movement. We moved to holding the oars out in my fingers, which is, I know it sounds simple, it's an incredibly hard change to make, and it changes how you balance the boat, and it changes a lot of things about your motor pattern, and that took us a long time to actually see positive results from quite a small change.
That was a real case of stepping backwards before you could step forward.
Absolutely.
And I bet you regret not learning that in your first singles lesson. Very hard to teach, by the way. If you're a coach, teaching people how to hold the sculls in their fingertips.
Yeah.
Did you have drills that you used to make that change?
Yeah, we do a lot of sort of fingers off on the recovery to really have that looseness of the recovery and learning how to just have a little bit of weight rather than like pushing the handles. And again, things like a double square blade drill, you need to have that looseness in your hands and in the fingers to be able to have the speed to do that. on the way forward. So we play with that a fair bit. In the men's quad, they're big on the one-finger roll-ups, which I was struggling with, but was a great challenge.
You literally have one finger and a thumb on the oar.
Yeah.
And everything else is just hanging off, and it's just a square blade roll-up from the finish to the catch.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I might borrow that one, thank you.
Yeah.
Next one down, one finger roll-up. Now, another question from a listener. This is from Christine Young, who's from Lake Toggeranong Rowing Club, and I guess that's in Australia. She says, do you find the single or the double harder?
I think I probably find the single more difficult because in a double it's so clear what your roles are in the boat. If you sit in the bow seat, your job is to really communicate. You're the one that's meant to be reading everything that's going on the boat. If you're stroking the boat, you've got to be consistent, you've got to be reliable, you've got to drive the boat. And I think breaking down those roles gives you such a clarity of purpose. In a single, you're all those roles and you're not accountable to someone else. So as much as it's in a lot of ways a very rewarding boat because it is so challenging, there's something really special about the dynamic you have in a double scull with the person that you're rowing with, and your job's not just to get the best out of yourself, it's to get the best out of the other person in the boat. And that's such an incredibly special bond that you share. So I'm not sure about which one's harder than the other, but they're both special in their different ways.
And now a question from Deb Steinman, who says, what are your preferred oars and boat make?
So I row, I row an Empacher. I actually changed my boat at the games between the heat and the final. People who watched the heat, it was incredibly rough and I was underwater essentially. And so I moved into a bigger boat, which I raced in the quarters, the semi and the final. I've tried lots of different boats over my career. I rode a Philippe in the 2012 games, which is a beautiful boat. I tend to like boats that are a little bit twitchier. I like getting that feedback about how I'm moving the boat. Oars-wise, I know I'm very good friends with the people at Croker, and I would love to encourage everyone to use Croker oars, but I've always used Concepts. They work a lot better for me. I like the feel of them in the water. I like the weight of the blades and that feeling of being locked on. I think you have two sorts of rowers, the pushers and the pullers. And I'm very much a pusher. I put the blade in and then lever off it, and the lock of the Concepts suits me very well.
Now, obviously, being an international, you've already mentioned that you had two boats in Rio. Where around the world do you keep your boats, or are they only ever on loan?
They're actually only on loan. Empacher have been very, very good to me. We asked them very sneakily before the games if I won a gold medal, whether I'd be able to keep my boat. And I think the pressure of the moment, they said yes. And so I'm going to be able to keep that boat, which is incredibly exciting because, being a rower can be quite financially tough. I'm not eligible for any medal money because I'm not competing next year. And so there's been two wonderful things to come out of winning a gold medal other than the satisfaction. One of them is having a boat that I'm going to be able to row for the rest of my life, which is very exciting. And the other one was the local cafe where we go every morning after training, has given me a lifetime voucher for muffins.
I know which is the more expensive.
You might be surprised.
Give them a shout out. What's the name of the cafe?
Farmer's Daughter in Yarralumla.
There we go. Finest Daughter, you are the tops. Brilliant. So you must have boats then that get given to you in Varese. You said you train at Gavarati, you train at Lucerne.
Yeah, we've got an incredible logistical manager who we have a fleet of boats in Gavirate. We have a fleet of boats in Australia, and they also had to arrange for a fleet of boats in Rio. So it was a huge undertaking this year. It's obviously a lot easier when we're racing in Europe. We just have the 2 fleets of boats. But they try to turn those over a fair bit.
Now, I happen to have been lucky enough to train at Gavirate, and I know that you say you have an ice cream the night before the race as your tradition. Do you remember the ice cream shop?
Yes, it's incredible.
Now, serious question. What are your rigging measurements?
I row a very conventional rig. So heights are 17, 18. Span, all my oars are 287, 88. I don't use smoothies. I use a big blade. Yeah, nothing particularly special about the rigging measurements. It's pretty much what you'd read in a textbook about how to set up a single. We've tried moving bits and pieces, but I think the main reason you'd change something is if you've got to match up someone quite short and someone quite tall in a double, which was definitely the case for me with a few people that I've rowed with, and then you might change the span. But we try to keep the rig quite conventional and focus more on the rowing. We train with a lot of different pitches. I raced with 4-4, but in training for learning a new skill, I've often rowed with 1 degree pitch to just practice that flatness through the water, and that's something that we fiddle with just to get a different stimulus.
And your span was
160.
160, as you say. It was very interesting when they did a survey of all of the rigging measurements from every competitor at the World Championships when they were in Eton Dorney, and when they published them, 99% were exactly as you said, standard. Yeah. So Becky Robinson from Ithaca College, I hope that answers everything. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you for giving us your time. Now, I believe you have a prize that is going to go into our monthly prize draw.
It's an Australian rowing shirt. It can be signed or unsigned as the winner pleases. And also, just one quick shout out. Next week I'm heading over to Africa, to the Kafui River and Rowing Centre, which is a project that World Rowing is running with the Worldwide Fund for Nature, to build a research centre to look at clean water issues worldwide. They've got a great page up on the World Rowing website about how you can get involved and how you can donate to a very worthy project, something that I'm very passionate about. And so if anyone has any interest or ability to just put even $5 into the project, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, we thoroughly endorse that. That would be a brilliant project to support. Now, Kim, let the listeners know how they can get in touch with you or follow you online.
I'm on Twitter. I think my handle is Kimmy J Crow. I haven't changed that one since I got married. And I'm not on Instagram, but I'm being told that that's the way of the future, so we'll have to see.
Fantastic. Now, for all you Row Perfect listeners, if you would like to be in to win the prize that Kim has donated, we draw the prize at the end of every month. And if you are subscribed to our monthly email newsletter, you're in to win. Sorry, that's wrong. It's a weekly email newsletter. And the newsletter comprises our blog posts, which have been published over the previous week, which are usually on rowing education topics. If you have any feedback about the show or suggestions of other people you'd like to hear us interview on RowingChat, please send them to info@rowperfect.co.uk, and please give us a rating in iTunes. We really, really appreciate every single listener we can get. We do want to be the rowing podcast that you want to listen to every month. Till next time, goodbye.